It was early in the morning in Tripoli. Even though it was late autumn, I remember it being unbearably hot. The airport terminal was even hotter, a concrete shell filled with stale air and exhaustion. I had been in Tripoli for most of the past 6 weeks. Long hours, little rest. In a few hours, I would be in Malta for a brief break, a rest and recuperation period. The promise of an ice-cold Shisk Pilsner beckoned. I just had to make it onto my flight. It took nearly 30 minutes to make my way from the terminal entrance to the check-in counter, clambering over luggage, stepping over sleeping families, waiting in non-existent queues. Although agitated from the journey across the terminal, I immediately relaxed upon reaching the counter. Greeted with a smile, my WFP colleague from the United Nations Humanitarian Air Service checked me in. The UN flight was the only safe way in or out of Tripoli. The 170-kilometer road trip to the Tunisian border was a no-go. Too many sporadic gunfights near the frontier. To the east, 450 kilometers away in Sirte, the final battle raged. Gaddafi loyalists, surrounded and desperate, showed no signs of surrendering. I stood patiently at the counter, boarding pass in hand, waiting for my colleagues to check in. I would be in Malta soon, I thought. I looked around. The familiar, discordant hum of a crowded terminal suddenly faded. People bent over their phones, speaking softly, whispering. Then came the sound of gunfire, sharp and close from just outside the terminal doors. The militia weren't reacting, neither were the passengers. I was simply confused. Moments later, as if on cue, men began chanting Allahu Akbar over and over. A woman started to ululate. Like a ripple, others joined in until the terminal vibrated with sound. Ignorantly, I assumed ululation was a sign of sorrow. I had much to learn about Libya. Outside, the gunfire grew heavier. All I could hear now was the constant crack of AK-47 fire and heavy machine guns being fired outside. Years later, I would still wonder why so many people at the airport had guns, and why I seemed to accept it. WFP colleagues quickly instructed us to move to the business terminal, a smaller building across the road. We didn't know what was happening, nor did the other non-Arabic speakers. As we crossed the road, my eardrums rang before I even realized that militiamen on the apron were firing their weapons into the air. Inside, the business terminal was little different from the main one. Glass, drywall, and years of grime. The walls were stained with smoke and dust. Rectangles of white paint marked where portraits of Muammar Gaddafi had once hung. We stood away from the windows. Not much protection against stray bullets. News trickled in, at first just whispers. Gaddafi had been killed in the battle for Sirte. Then, the confirmation. The Gaddafi. Colonel Gaddafi. A Libyan man beside me, expressionless, shook his head. He said he wouldn't believe it until he saw the body with his own eyes. Gaddafi was too clever, he muttered, too cunning. For hours, we waited for the plane from Malta. It was circling offshore, unable to land. Despite the heavy weapon fire echoing outside, I told myself the flight would still arrive. The WFP flight controller was in contact with the crew. Watching his face, I knew the UN contracted aircraft had turned back. Apparently, gunfire, airports, and commercial planes don't mix. By then, Tripoli International Airport was officially closed. Gunfire echoed across the capital. Late in the afternoon, Mahmoud Jibril, Prime Minister of the National Transitional Council, addressed the nation. "We have been waiting for this moment for a long time," he said. "Muammar Gaddafi has been killed. It is time to start a new Libya, a united Libya." After a few hours, it was decided we would drive back to the UN compound at Palm City Residences, a short trip west of the city. We climbed into armored Toyota Land Cruisers, armored enough to stop an AK-47 round or shrapnel from an explosive, but not a direct blast. Hardly ideal when driving through jubilant, unpredictable crowds. The last thing the UN needed was a tragedy on the day Libya was freed. In convoy, we rolled out, windows up, doors locked. We were under orders not to open them. That drive remains one of the most surreal experiences of my life. The red, green, and black tricolor of the revolution was everywhere. Open trucks packed with young men in fatigues, draped in flags, roared through the streets. People danced. A man rushed toward us offering rose water. a traditional gift for guests. Children stared in awe at the spontaneous celebration. My words can't fully describe my feelings and memories of that day, nor can my photos, quickly snapped through the window as we drove through joyous crowds. It was like a yoke had been lifted from them, and for them, in that moment, anything felt possible. A future free and bright. After about an hour, we reached the compound, safe, sound, and drained. That evening, over dinner, all conversation turned to the death of Gaddafi and the future of Libya. We knew the road ahead would be difficult, but optimism ruled over doubt that night. The next morning, we returned to the airport. The check-in was uneventful. As we waited for our flight, a Libyan man approached me. Pulling out his phone, he showed me graphic photos of Gaddafi's bloodied body. He told me he had driven to Misrata overnight and waited in line to see the dead dictator. I was lost for words. 5 years on, the memories of that day are clouded in sadness. Not for the moment itself, forever frozen in photos, but for what followed, for the missed opportunities, for the struggle of the Libyan people to find peace and stability. What happened to the Arab Spring?